highly fortunate to witness great intellectuals like Mr. Rohit Tripathi sir, the founder of Ranchi Mall, and Saurabh Rana sir, an eminent member of NIFTA and an IIM Calcutta graduate and a senior business consultant at one of the leading consultancy companies, Infosys. We'll be sharing the valuable insights on topics such as emerging entrepreneurship opportunities through crypto ecosystem and the rise of platform economy. Now, to eschew any inconvenience that might occur during the session, my co-host Prabha will now take you through a set of introductions. Over to you, Prabha.
Firstly, everyone is requested to put yourself on mute and when not sharing and when sir is speaking. And secondly, if you have any questions during the session, please type them in the chat box, or you can bring them up during the Q&A session that we will be holding at the last. Now, Kadamni, please take over.
Now I would request Mr. Rohit Tripathi sir to please guide us through his expertise on emerging entrepreneurship opportunities through crypto ecosystem. Over to you, sir.
Fantastic, Kadambini and Prabhav. Excellent introduction. Good preparations.
Thank you, sir.
So I had a small presentation that I had given to all of you, and I would like to quickly run through that presentation, and then I have some questions. Like if we have some time, then we can take some of the questions, like my personal experiences, But essentially, what I want to impress upon you is that you are at the start of a revolution. And if you are at the start of a revolution, your first objective should be to understand that revolution and then make a move in that revolution. If you could do that, then you would be the next Elon Musk, or you would be the next Jeff Bezos, or you would be the next Bill Gates. The names that I just gave you are big, just not because they were talented, but also they had a sense of what is emerging. So let me take the presentation now. Let me become the presenter. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Your screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
So can you confirm? Okay, perfect. Until internet economy in late 1990s and early 2000s took the world by storm, we felt that a revolution of that magnitude would never happen again. And we were thoroughly proven wrong. We are now seeing something much bigger than that. And we can clearly see that crypto systems are the fastest growing entrepreneurship segment in the history of mankind. In 2009, the total value of all the crypto economic activities in the world was zero, clean zero. As we stand in 2021, the market capitalization, which is value of all the tokens being circulated and being traded in crypto economies and crypto exchanges of the world, has exceeded 2.3 trillion US dollar. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollar. $1 billion is 1,000 million dollar. $1 million is 10 lakh dollars. So imagine you have 10 lakh dollars, you multiply that by 1,000, and then you multiply it by another 1,000, and you multiply the whole thing by 2.3. That's the size we are looking at. So just to give you a comparison, the size of Indian economy, the entire Indian economy, the GDP of India is $2.7 trillion. And crypto systems are growing so fast that they reach $1 trillion exactly this year, at the start of this year. And now they're already at $2.3 trillion. Now, often when we have such kind of numbers, you should know, you should get some comparative data to realize what it takes to reach $1 trillion. US economy, when the first president took office in US in 1789, it took 170 years. In 1959, the US economy reached $1 trillion. But United States of America was not formed in 1789. It was formed much earlier. It was formed when the Britishers came to that country in its modern form. And that was in 1607. So from 1607 till 1959, 352 years has passed. The first economic activity in US was tobacco plantations in Virginia. And starting from those tobacco plantations all the way up till now, US has reached $20 trillion. But it reached as crypto systems took only 12 years. Imagine how fast this economy is emerging. Compare that to India. India reached $1 trillion club only in the year 2002. It took 55 years since independence to do that. But just like US, Indian economic activity did not start at independence. India is a bronze age. It's the oldest known economy in the world. It has taken thousands of years to reach to 2002 and reach $1 trillion. And so now you can imagine that if something has emerged so fast in 12 years, how fast it is growing. Once you realize that there's an economy which is very, very fast growing, then if you want to become an entrepreneur, you want to have your hat in it, you want to participate in it, you want to create something which grows really fast. Because if you join a massive wave, then it's very easy to create, especially at the early days, then it's very easy to create a very, very big business and a transformative business. And that's a wave that you should not miss. So I'm now going to talk about why crypto economic systems are growing so incredibly fast. First, in crypto economy, anyone and anywhere in the world, they can participate. Anyone can buy a token of Bitcoin, for instance. Anyone can buy Ethereum anywhere in the world. And as simple as it sounds, we could not achieve this until now. If a company is formed in US, it has to take permissions and approvals to be able to do business in India. If Infosys is found in India, it still needs approval and it needs a lot of work before it can offer its services in the United States of America. And there are two different set of rules there. So if you have a big target area, then the economy will be large. Why does Shah Rukh Khan, for a single movie, he gets paid in crores and crores, whereas a person who is a PhD in mathematics, extremely genius, he might only get salary of maybe 15 to 20 lakh rupees. Why? Because for a PhD, if he wants to apply for professorship, there are only 10 or 20 cream high-class universities that he can apply, and that is customer base. Whereas for Shah Rukh Khan, every person who can watch, who can pay for a ticket at a movie theater, or who can pay for the subscription in Netflix, he is a potential customer. So if your number of customers are large, your payments will be large. As simple as that. The second reason why it is growing so fast is that there are no artificial barriers in crypto economic system. You can form your own rules and no one is going to stop you, because any crypto economic system only needs data to be transported. And anyone can sit in his home on an internet, on a geo internet at his home with high-speed broadband connection, and he can straight away access any of the data anywhere in the world. And this is very different compared to regulatory and licensing system in national economic system. It's not easy to, you have to first register a company and then you have to follow all the guidelines and the laws, and which gets updated time and again. None of it is there in crypto economic system. So that makes a big difference as to why it's growing, how fast it's going to grow. Now the next question is, what have crypto entrepreneurs done in the last 12 years? All of us have known probably about Bitcoins. If not, Bitcoin is the most common thing people talk about. But Bitcoin is just a very small part of the things which are happening. The first is the class that is called value-bearing assets, which is using the principle of artificial scarcity. And artificial scarcity, we could never create genuine scarcity using anything in the world. Our best chance of creating scarcity was gold, silver, and diamond. And in all three cases, we have found new mines for gold and silver, and now we can even artificially generate diamonds. So it was very difficult to create artificial scarcity. And the only way to do genuine artificial scarcity was through the technology, what is called blockchain technology. So we can create value-bearing assets using principles of artificial scarcity, and that's a new creation altogether. Then we also have exchanges that can trade those assets. Yesterday in your group, someone was telling me that they are trading some coins like Doge coins on WajirX. So there are roughly 8,000 big crypto systems in the world, big blockchains in the world, and there are 12,000 exchanges in the world. Can you imagine? Well, we have 4,000 big stocks in India and only 2 big exchanges, National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange in India. Whereas in case of crypto economic system, we have 8,000 stocks and 12,000 exchanges. So exchange is a huge business. And then we also have new areas like crypto mining and hardware industry that supports mining. And crypto mining is a technology that goes inside blockchain. But that's also a huge economy. That's a very big service. Now, people have done something called smart contracts. And what is the meaning of smart contract? Is that you decide the rules as to who is going to pay for what, and and who is going to be paid out under what condition. All of them can be automatically coded on a blockchain. And it has been realized that you can create banks, you can create insurance companies, you can create exchanges, you can create universities, you can anything that you can do on internet, you can also do on a smart contract platform. So crypto entrepreneurs are creating smart contract platforms. And then they are doing new fundraising concepts like initial coin offering. Initial coin offering is equivalent to initial public offerings that normal companies do to raise funds. And Ranchi Mall was India's first large-scale initial coin offering. We did that in the year of 2017, the year in which this whole concept emerged. And we did it the same year itself. And that's a fascinating concept, that if you want to run a business, you don't have to go to a venture capital. You don't have to go to a regulator. You simply have to do an initial coin offering, take money from people, and make sure that you honor your commitments. And that gets you a start immediately. Crypto entrepreneurs are also creating new tools and technologies that can make crypto system move very, very fast. So one of my juniors in NITI, he started a company called Polygon, did an ICO on that. He is one of the token holders in Ranchi Mall also. And Polygon is now one of the top 60 crypto blockchains in the world. And its valuation is $2 billion. $2 billion. Okay, not many Indian companies, mainstream companies, can claim to be $1 billion company. He has done it. And he is basically doing a scaling technology. He's trying to make Ethereum faster. Just 3 years. You create a $2 billion company in 3 years. It's not possible anywhere except in crypto systems. But the biggest revolution these days is what we call as DeFi platforms. DeFi stands for distributed finance. And if you see the kind of the banking, the interest rate products, the kind of insurance products which are coming up in that area, you'll be blown away. And you're just forced to think, how can the current banks like ICICI Bank or State Bank of India, how would they ever come close competing with these kind of banking concepts which are coming up? At least I get really surprised. And of course, wherever there is, we also have gambling, and we also have all kind of prediction markets. And prediction markets mean that people can take bet on whether someone is going to, if it's going to rain 3 days from now or not, and the money gets allocated among the winners, and that's also emerging as huge. It's a very, very big area which is emerging. There are many more things that I can't even talk about. It every single day a new area emerges. The current hotshot is something called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. That's also an idea related to artificial scarcity in the area of artworks. A person who tracks this industry is simply amazed as to the amount of things people are doing with so few resources. It's just amazing. So one of the reasons why I selected a topic on crypto systems as to emerging opportunities in crypto systems is, if you are a startup entrepreneur with no money and no contact and no venture capital, then crypto systems has all the right enablers that can make you start up. Number one, you don't need a lot of money to start. You just need ideas. You don't need capital to start at all. And you can change the whole industry with few lines of code. Like Satoshi Nakamoto, who created Bitcoin, he changed the world of centralized banking with a code base whose size was less than 10 megabytes. It's magical. Also, your economic returns are very, very large if you are smart in thinking. And I just give you an example of Polygon or Matic network, which reached a market capitalization of $2 billion in 3 years, starting from India. Also, one of the big advantages in crypto systems is that you are not competing with someone who's going to oppose you, like someone who is in power. And if you were to start an airline business today, you will have to handle all kinds of pressures from existing airline companies, positive as well as negative. You cannot even start a railway company in India because railway is so heavily regulated. But when you create something new in crypto, no one knows about it. No one can stop you. There's no existing old guard to oppose you. So you have all the right enablers, to be able to be a startup entrepreneur in crypto systems. And I really love this. What I really love about crypto system is that crypto systems provide a very fast path to transform society with just the power of ideas. If you have ideas but no money, no problem at all. You can transform society. You can impact a lot of people, millions of people. Also, if you're an individual entrepreneur, if you're smart and if you get it right, it represents one of the easiest ways to achieve economic self-sufficiency. I don't know what salaries that you get from NIFT, NI50, but I can guarantee you, if you can create a very smart enterprise in crypto system, those salaries will be almost peanuts. It will be very, very small amount compared to what is possible. And I think that it's the easiest way to do it. It's even it's to achieve a level of income that can make you independent. So if you are a startup entrepreneur, how should you approach? How should you approach a crypto system? How should you start doing? What are things that you should, precautions that you should take care of? What are things that you should do? This is very important. Do not think how big you want to be. Think how smart you can be. Can you create a product that can make a big difference to 5 people around you? Thinking smart is very important. The second thing which I feel is very important is that do not bank on, do not be dependent on at least 1 million people coming or 1 million transactions happening for you to be profitable. If you look at Ola, or if you look at Flipkart, Flipkart is still not profitable. Flipkart is touches almost all of India today, but they're still not profitable. And now they don't have any headroom to become profitable, which means they are frozen. They're locked in being unprofitable. And the problem is their unit transaction is unprofitable. So if you buy a laptop from Flipkart, Flipkart is actually making loss on that transaction at a unit level. Now you multiply it over 1 million transactions, imagine how big the loss is. So unless you are making economically profitable transactions at a unit level, you will not get it right. You will definitely not get it right in crypto. Now I'd like to give you an example of Ranchi Mall's Bitcoin bond. We had only 59 users. We did this product at the start of 2017. We had only 59 users, and we are doing almost little shy of $1 million of profits, pure profits. And all we had to do was to just announce the product on Facebook, and we had the customers, and the maintenance is very low. I don't have to interact with those customers. They talk to me once in 3 years. So I think it's very important that you should plan to be self-sufficient with the circle, your own known circle of people itself. Everyone in Ranchi Mall, every person in Ranchi Mall Bitcoin bond is personally known to me. They trust me, and that is enough for me to achieve economic self-sufficiency. I don't need to go anywhere else, and the product profits are growing for us. So I am very proud of this product, Bitcoin bonds. The other important thing is you will not have a lot of resources at your command. You will have few people around you, but those people who already know you, who have history with you, you have to really make very intelligent usage of them, and you have to keep their trust. I mean, there will be over a long time all kinds of things happen, but you have to keep the trust of your employees and your investors, and because they are very critical in propelling you to the next league. And one thing you should not forget is social media has been a transformational factor. It's another transformational factor, just like crypto economy system is a transformational factor. Social media is also a transformational factor. So you must make very quality usage of social media, high quality content. And you should never spam people. You should not spam people with hundreds of emails every day, or sending the same email to millions of people. You should be very targeted, have a very nice product, a very high value product, and offer to some of the people who already trust you. They will take it. They will take it from you. You will become bigger, and once you become bigger, then your name itself will get you more customers. The other thing which I can tell you from my experience is do not promise people extraordinary returns, even if your product can give extraordinary returns. So in Bitcoin bonds, I knew the returns are going to be very, very high. In 2017, when we started, 1 lakh rupees that if you had invested in $975 Bitcoin bond scheme is today roughly around 30 lakh rupees. So 1 lakh rupees became 30 lakh rupees. So that's an exceptional rate of return. But I could not promise more. You will never get a chance again in your life. So make sure that it's okay to take your time. It's okay to do it safely, but never allow your idea, because most of the crypto ideas are money-related ideas. Make sure that you are not dependent on someone else paying you and becoming your investor, so that the previous investor can get his money back. Okay, you have to create some value. You have to create something where even if investors are dead, still you can carry through your business. All right. So with that, I will welcome your questions, and let me take the screen back. I don't know. I think I'm in my time. Yes, I still have probably 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so I think one question is from Abdul Samad. Can you share your own experience, like how you got started with blockchain and crypto world? Well, the way I got started was I was looking at 8 different ideas before I took the plunge into blockchain and crypto world. And I've been observing those ideas since 2011. And then I started observing which one of the idea has the most potential. So I obviously had no clue when I started that this is what I would be doing. One of the ideas was that I would help people buy stocks in US, which is not so easy to do in India, and help them buy stocks like Google and Facebook, and Amazon. And but then I realized that the returns in US stock is higher compared to Indian stocks, especially if the stock is high quality. But then there's a lot of regulatory issues there, and I may not be able to come up with a very viable product, a profitable product with a small user base. So I started observing Bitcoins, and I started observing cryptography, and I had the technical background to understand what's going on. And slowly I started coming to this conclusion that I have to do something in crypto world. So I actually traveled quite a bit. I traveled to China, I traveled to US, I traveled to Colombia, I traveled a couple of countries in that round. And then finally my first product came, which is Bitcoin Bond. Once Bitcoin Bond was out, then I had the infrastructure and I had the experience and I had the idea. Then the other things started happening automatically.
We have a second question from Anirudh Oran. Sir, he's asking your views on NFTs.
So I think he means NFTs. So
yes, sir,
I talked about so NFTs. So I had a product on NFT earlier, another version on NFT, in 2017. So what NFT is? Suppose you are a very good painter. We will put your painting rights, the ownership rights of that painting, on the blockchain, and will allow all the people to start bidding for those ownership rights. And if the person is famous, or if he can create something which excites more people, the valuation of that NFT goes up very, very high. And currently NFT is very, very, very high in fashion right now. So NFT is a big market, definitely. So the question is, what is my view on NFT? NFT is a very, very big market, and it would definitely, it's a $1 trillion market in future. Remember, right now, the entire blockchain, everything put together is 2.3 trillion, right? And so NFT itself will be $1 trillion. But I don't think that NFT is the most exciting thing in blockchain world. I mean, for me, excitement will come when you can get your education without paying fees, but getting money from the system while you are studying. We can do that in blockchain. If you can impact education in the world, if you can impact healthcare in the world, if you can impact politics, we can create political parties out of blockchain now. We can do a lot of things. So something which can impact masses, something which can impact people in real way and change their lives, I find those ideas more exciting. And NFT will make a lot of money for a very few people. It definitely will make. But that's something which is, and I would strongly encourage, if you have a great idea in NFT, go for it, But I would rather want, for us, for Ranchi Mall, I would rather want a societal transformative idea, something which can help everyone. That's my point of view on that.
Sir, Shakti Kumar is asking why cryptos have more exchanges than stock exchanges.
Because stock exchanges, you need the permission of the parliament. Like National Stock Exchange had to be approved by the parliament. Bombay Stock Exchange was much earlier. It was formed voluntarily, but it has a lot of laws, and so to start any stock exchange, you need permission of the government of the nation. Whereas for a crypto exchange, anyone who comes in this business, the first idea that he gets is to start a crypto exchange. Because it's so easy, because Bitcoin is already there. Now, what do you want to do with Bitcoins? Okay, people want to exchange Bitcoin. So, okay, let's make an exchange. And if you make an exchange and if you get 0.01% of it, and if the transaction volume is $1 billion, you get $1 million. So it's a very quick start and easy money-making opportunity. And that's why we get, it's easier to start an exchange than to start a new coin, usually. So there we have so many exchanges in crypto world.
Sir, we have a question from Ashutosh. Why we always think of money-making scheme whenever we think about startups? Why it can't be same thing which will welfare our society? Do people need to change their mentality in this regard?
No, see, if you want to change society, okay, you have to be self-sufficient yourself first. Suppose you are in an aircraft, okay, if you're flown, they will tell you that if there is a oxygen mask that's going to fall on your if you have a kid with you, you have to first protect yourself, then you can protect the kid. Because if you put the mask on the kid and you yourself, let's say you lose your consciousness, then the kid will also lose his consciousness. So before you can do welfare for the society, you have to do welfare for yourself first, right? So the way entrepreneurship, what we have realized is that you have to pay salary to the people, okay, which is a very big, which is welfare. Paying salary to people is a lot of welfare. You have to pay for office. You're doing a lot of social welfare in the silent mode. So you could say that, all right, I want to change the world. I want to get the world rid of polio, or I want to get rid of, I want everyone to be educated, or I want to feed the poor kids. Those are good ideas, but you don't have a way to fund it. So what you will do, you will go and ask money to other people. And now, once that money is given to you, it's not adding any net economic value to the society. It's just a transfer. It's just a transfer of asset from someone to someone else. Whereas if you were to do the same thing, suppose you were to create a way in which people can eat food cheaply, like McDonald's did. McDonald's in US, it brought down the average cost of food by like down to 25%. So now more people are eating. But now at this point of time, if the person who is eating and the person who is giving, who is running the outlet, McDonald's outlet, both of them are adding value to society. So making money is not evil. One of the things that unfortunately, which we believe in India, that making money is evil. Making money is not evil. Making money is a process by which you can enable yourself and your ideas, and then you can affect transformation in the society. But you have to do. No matter what you do, you will have to fund it. If you cannot fund it, it cannot be done. In entrepreneurship, we attack that problem head on. We first say, okay, how can we fund ourselves? We attack that problem first, and then at the same point of time, we also think, how do we transform the society? So there's another question.
Sir, I'll help you with the question. Sir. It's
Yes,
Vivek Anand asking, in your view, which model is better, B2B or B2C? And why most of Indian unicorn is a B2C company?
See, a unicorn will have to be a B2C company, and only a rare and exceptional company would become a unicorn in B2B space. And the reason is the same. If you are a B2C, then your number of customers are higher. So if you are an Ola, just in the city of Ranchi, you will get around 50,000 customers. But if you are a B2B, how many enterprises are there in Ranchi? You have HEC, you have CMPDI, you have CCL, you have very few enterprises, large enterprises, 10 and 12, maybe not more than that. So if your number of customers are higher, then it is easier to create value and higher valuation. So most of the unicorns will be in B2C. Although there can be, like, there's a company in US called Palantir, which is again a unicorn, and it is purely B2B. So you can create a unicorn in B2B space as well, but it's much easier in B2C space if you get that right.
Thank you so much, sir. Excellently spoken. Your words were really motivating, and this must have infused a wave of enthusiasm into our emerging entrepreneurs' minds. Due to time constraints, we will limit the questions to now. And now I would urge Mr. Saurabh Rana sir to kindly take over and express his views on his topic, the rise of platform economy. Over to you, sir.
Sure. I can present my screen, I believe. One sec. Okay, thanks Kadambini and Prabhav for such a lovely introduction. Thanks, Aman, for inviting me here. I'm really glad to meet all of you. I hope all of you are keeping yourself safe and healthy. Uh, so the topic I've chosen is the rise of platform economy. Before I get to the topic, I just wanted to briefly explain my journey after NIFT. I've been associated with Tata Hitachi in the strategic sourcing function for 5.5 years. Then I did my 1 year MBA from AMCAL, and then I've been working with Infosys Consulting for 2 years now. And uh, basically, when Aman contacted me and said that I need to present without an entrepreneurial experience myself, I said that what can I give them which can help them identify businesses which have immense potential. So I came up with a set of slides which are easy enough to understand. At least it can leave an effect of how powerful these digital platforms can be. So just an introduction that these platforms are not new. Even if we see classified ads and shopping malls, these are also type of platforms where market transactions take place. These are nothing but just kind of an intermediary between two set of groups. One is consumers and the second is advertisers in case of classifieds, and consumers and retail, restaurant and entertainment for shopping malls. So as you can see that both are positively correlated with each other. So if the number of consumers increase, then that would lead to more advertisers, and more advertisers lead to more consumers. So that's a self-reinforcing loop, which happens for platforms. Similarly, if they have more customers, more footfalls, that would invite more people to join the mall. Then and for more retail, restaurant, entertainment, that would feed into more customers. What has changed is it's the digitization of platforms that causing disruption in traditional industries. So as you can see, examples like Amazon, Uber, and Wikipedia, and I believe Rohit sir also pointed out crowdsourcing platforms are also one place where kind of investment seekers are kind of interacting with people who want to invest. So these are the typical type of platforms out there, and as you can gauge, these are pretty successful platforms. I'll explore more into how they become so successful and how the economics works out for them. So just a simple case of how the business models itself are changing. Let's see a comparison between Britannica and Wikipedia. In its heydays, Britannica used to kind of search for academic experts and hire them, create content, get them review, edit it, then publish and then distribute it. And finally, we came out with these costly stuff of encyclopedias, which we used to kind of keep in our libraries, or which we used to refer earlier. So as you can understand that each of these process takes a lot of cost and effort. And also it's not very easy to even kind of update these encyclopedias. They have to kind of wait for next version, and then they have to kind of they have a pending backlog of all the changes they want to do. Now let's see how Wikipedia managed it so fast. I mean, there are 53 million articles, 309 languages, and 596 articles are added every day. Now, the way it managed that is like it made each one of us a potential kind of contributor to Wikipedia. So I can also be a contributor to Wikipedia despite not being an academic expert. However, it relied on a consensus mechanism, which was really innovative. I would urge you all to search after this what was a consensus mechanism and how it works. And essentially, it enabled kind of people reaching to a common consensus that this is what should be right, and this is therefore should be published to common readers. And if we are seeing that, okay, I'm not an expert, and if I'm trying to compete with Britannica, then you may think that the accuracy of the source would be very low. But research has revealed that Wikipedia is as accurate as Britannica. I've mentioned the link to the source. You can check later. So as you can see that it's a very effective medium of distribution of knowledge. and that's only possible through platform economy. Let's consider an interesting case, a backstory. Uber was having a lot of interest, it was gaining a lot of interest in VC circles, and people were really investing a lot of money. And by its G round, it kind of reached 50 billion valuation. And Professor Aswath Damodaran then said that Uber's market cap should be 5.9 billion at best. He calculated risk adjusted discounted cash flows, and then he came out with these valuation, and he said that it was a bubble which would ultimately burst. And he's also considered the god of corporate finance, so you can imagine his words carry a lot of weight. Now, what happened was David Sachs was said that no, it can't be $5.9 billion valuation because they also rely on a network effect. And if you can see, he trod it on a napkin. How Uber business model kind of feeds into itself. So more demand leads to more drivers leads to more geographic coverage, more geographic coverage leads to faster pickups, which then leads to more demand. It also leads to less driver downtime and lower prices, which again fuels more demand. So as you can see, this loop kind of runs in itself, and it's a self-reinforcing loop in itself. So that's how Uber business model was so successful. And can you this data is as of yesterday. Uber's current market cap is $112 billion. So basically, the god of corporate finance was wrong by a factor of 19. Can you imagine that? So that's how these network effects are really powerful. And you can see from this graph why VCs kind of love these businesses. It's because the value increases as a square of the connection, whereas the cost increases linearly. So that's where they have to kind of have enough headroom so that they can grow. As Rohit sir pointed out, in case of Flipkart, they are saying that they don't have enough headroom to grow. That should not be the case. They should ideally have a headroom. Then, for example, Swiggy and Zomato, they are competing for headroom to grow, right? So that's where it's important that the businesses should have unit cost economics working out well for them, which is certainly not happening for Flipkart, but is happening for many other companies like Amazon and other people who are running different platforms. Digital platforms can also scale very quickly. Let's see this, how much different products and services took the time to reach 50 million users. If you can see, airplanes took 68 years, ATM took 18 years, computer took 14 years. And if we see different platforms, YouTube took only 4 years, Facebook 3 years, Twitter 2 years, and Pokemon Go only 19 days. Right? So that's how these platforms can scale very quickly. Another example can be Jack Ma, who very early in his days, he said that if he'd be bigger than Walmart. So he said that if Walmart wants to have 10,000 new customers, they'll need new warehouses and whatnot. For me, all it takes is 2 servers. Let's look at the current market cap. As of yesterday, Alibaba's market cap was $658 billion and Walmart was only $396 billion. And that's why these platforms are really disrupting traditional business models. Of course, these come with its own set of good, bad, and ugly. So let's see the good points. So good points is everyone benefits in the network. It offers low prices to the consumers because the customer acquisition cost is itself low for these businesses. Therefore, they pass on those benefits to end consumers. The second one is equal opportunity. As you must have seen that it's offering a lot of jobs to many folks who offer to kind of become participants to these platforms. It can also circumvent closed markets. So if you see the case of Uber versus the New York taxi, then you can see that earlier this market was very regulated and they used to wait for a long time to get these taxi medallions. And even the prices of these medallions was going up like anything. If you can see this graph, they've compared it to even S&P 500. So you can imagine that how close these markets were, and therefore the end customers had to pay higher prices. So Uber disrupted this market as well. Uh, the bad part would be that once they become big due to network effect, they can even kind of manipulate the markets. They can favor one participant over another participant. That's how powerful they can become. And the second is privacy standards can be lowered by large players. For example, recently we have seen WhatsApp has rolled out its new update, updated privacy consent form. And many people were saying that let's switch over to Signal. However, practically that effort failed. A lot of us are still using WhatsApp and have not migrated to Signal. That's because most of the people are here, and it's very difficult to kind of gain enough attraction to another platform. So that's how powerful these networks or these platforms have become. The ugly side can it be that it can use customer data and use it unfairly for price gouging. One simple example can be a surge price in case of bad weather or rain. And this even more sinister example can be, let's say it has an API connection to your Yahoo Mail and knows that you have an interview in 1 hour. Then what it can do is it can kind of raise your prices. It realizes that you're not that price sensitive now. So it can raise even the price for your next cab service. So that's the ugly part of it, which we haven't seen so far. I mean, in rare instance we have seen, but that's how ugly it can get if it starts using data in a in a sinister way. So that was it. Thank you. Stay safe, healthy, and happy.
Thank you so much, sir. I
Yeah.
deeply appreciate the wonderful presentation you made at the meeting. Your words were excellently conveyed to our listeners. Now I would request Kadamini to proceed with the Q&A session for Saurabh Rana, sir.
Okay, it seems we have got few questions. It's Abdul Samad asking, Sir, Tesla is often pointed out to be overvalued. Your views on it? And if a high value stock like Tesla crashes, what effects can it cause on the national economy? Is it true that crashing of big blue chip stocks can cause a domino effect, leading to downfall of other stocks?
Yeah, excellent question, Abdul. I mean, I'll tell you why Tesla is being seen as overpriced because of its recent stock market rally. I believe the last I read about it, its PE ratio was around 758, which is considered overly expensive. But again, if you see, Tesla is kind of an innovator in this market. And if you see an article, it said that Tesla is 10 years ahead in terms of the electronics and the different gadgets it has compared to its competitors. So that's why people are seeing Tesla more as a platform where it has kind of open sources architecture and asking suppliers to join hands with them and then become kind of a network, right? So even Tesla is going to approach by becoming a network. That's where one part of the valuation is. Second part of the valuation is in terms of how do we say the artificial intelligence. So what happens is, as you know, Tesla has self-driving capability as well, and it would only keep on improving from here. So any late participants would need a lot of time, training, and effort to train their AI systems, and then they'll reach that maturity that they can fly on normal roads. But Tesla having years of experience now in that category, the AI system is absolutely brilliant, and that's the second area where they want to use that data into its platform. So even if you've seen one article, it says that Tesla has kind of made its revealed a number of its patents, so it has made them open source. Now, it's not out of generosity that a company would disclose all its patents to the entire set of participants and competitors and suppliers. It happens because it wants to join bonds with, it wants the companies to join bonds with them, and then they become platform and take a cut out of every transaction. So people are pricing in these factors. The second part of your question is regarding crash of a stock. So yeah, I mean, if you see 1999, I believe there was a dot-com crash. where people were finding that any dot-com bubble, any dot-com IPO that comes, they were kind of priced in like multiple Ps, right? So what happened was there were a lot of new interests that used to come in. So even now, if I'm not a stock market participant and I would see that, okay, my friend made 30 times his money by just participating in one stock or one IPO, then I would probably participate in the next one too. And that fuels a bubble rally. So over time, these kind of correct themselves. But the point is that nobody can accurately predict when the next bubble crash would occur. So it can go on for an extended period of time without even realizing it's happening. Right? So it's very. I mean, Tesla valuation in my case, it's I believe it's justified because it's turning many asset-heavy industries and companies like Ford, GE, all these companies are very asset-heavy, and it's turning it on its head, right? So therefore, it's really it's enjoying a really good stock market rally. Is Tesla becoming a monopoly? Not really, Aditya, because if you see, uh, I mean, generally, if you see even Apple versus Microsoft competition, right? So when Apple was really weak and was almost on the verge of kind of probably it had 1 month of cash left for its business operations, then Microsoft cut a deal with them and helped them survive. So the strategy was that a monopolistic market is definitely not favored upon even I mean is not even beneficial for the one incumbent, like for the remaining survival. So what will happen is that it would in turn lead to the internal amount of inefficiencies and all those kind of things. So even if Tesla would be on the verge of becoming a monopoly, it would want a weaker competitor to survive so that it also retains that fresh blood and its will to fight. That's how companies remain efficient. uh, Ashutosh, what will be the potential risk to a startup or a business after 4 or 5 years, right? Okay, so I mean, I believe anyway, even if the risk is there, what you do is like in its starting days of any startup, what you do is you test the model, right? And you come up with what kind of risk and what kind of problems, SWOT analysis is what we call them, is kind of there. And then if you feel that the risk is getting larger, then you kind of pivot to a new business model if required, and then that's how you continue your journey. So even if you see the case of Instagram, how many pivots it has, so that's how business accommodate these new risks. So 4 or 5 years from now, you cannot probably predict what kind of new risk you would be seeing then. So you would kind of have to evolve your business models in times with the or in as per the latest business trends. Yeah. Just in case if you're not satisfied, you can also ping back saying that you need further clarification. Can Apple take over Tesla in the coming year? Uh, Probably it's trying to compete with them, is what I understand. If you see the initiative of Apple cars, then they are also trying to enter into that space of autonomous driving and all those kind of things. I believe it's too difficult for such a large takeover. Of course, with the regulatory challenges themselves, the certain regulatory hurdles that are in front of two big businesses from merging into each other, right? So I don't think it would happen. Takeover is something I don't find probable. Tripathi says, which emerging platforms are you excited about? So probably these crowdsourcing platforms, definitely, because these are really effective mediums. And also, I'm excited about platforms like Airbnb, which are probably uh, in industries such as hospitality and other things. So if you see that platforms are causing the maximum disruption in industries such as probably hospitality, and second is real estate, because these industries have remained stagnant for so long. There has not been a major innovation in these industries, and that's where I think new startups can create a disruption. So I believe platforms in these spaces is something I'm really excited about. So how has the pandemic affected the startups which are relatively new? It definitely has helped few, and has been a major roadblock for many others. For example, I can cite this with an example of, let's say, Oyo. So you can see that before pandemic, they were like really growing many folds, and the network was really strong. But now, if you see that these startups are facing, this kind of startups are facing lot of cash crunch. However, on the other side, you have maybe startups based on cloud technology or based on let's say a platform like video conferencing platforms. So these startups are now facing the major moment of the major moment of boom. So I think it depends upon which industry that or which market that startups caters to. So even in the pandemic, in the remote working, there are some things which we are using more of, right? So how has the okay the Paraman says, does Indian investors support cryptocurrency? I mean, they have to. I believe it's a force to be reckoned with. I don't think that it's no more kind of era where we can say that cryptocurrency are not coming of age. They would definitely support cryptocurrency, even if you see kind of I can't cite any Indian investor who has openly come out in support of cryptocurrency. But if you see Elon Musk, he has already supported Bitcoin. Tesla is also going to accept Bitcoin payments. So you can see that some of these global investors are already supporting them. And as that happens, it would cascade itself into different geographies, and Indian investors would definitely also uh, jump the bandwagon, right? Alok asks that is Indian startup lacking in something to grow more? Hmm, lacking in something to grow more. I mean, I would have to say that probably in terms, most of the ideas, if you see in Indian startups, I mean, unfortunately, I have to say that many of the ideas are copied from the West, and we are just trying to emulate what has been successful over there. But that's another way of becoming successful. That we emulate good business models. That's how even China has become so successful and strong as a nation, because they have kind of emulated all the good things that different people or different companies have taught them, right? So I believe, I think the ability to innovate is something we are kind of, I mean, we should be better at, and I think we are improving at that. Right? So I think original business models coming out of India that can be replicated in West can be something that would excite us a lot more. Right? So Salim, I want to apply platform economy in a healthcare system. Can you guide about it? What mistakes can you suggest to avoid as a new startup? Yeah, I mean, definitely, I can definitely guide you, Salim, on this. Let's talk more about this. And the typical mistakes that a new startup does is maybe it most of the startups fail not because of a non-viable business model, but because of its cash management strategies as well. So typically, if we see that once they get a high valuation or they get funding, they're not very prudent about how they utilize their cash resources. I've seen, maybe I can cite few examples where Ola has made huge mistakes, and they had to correct them, and that has caused a lot of panic among its current set of investors, right? So those are some of the examples that we can say. We should be very prudent with the way we manage our cash. And what are your views regarding problems Indian farmers are facing for years? Uh, let's say, I mean, well, you may have to elaborate more. Maybe it's because of the price, it's because of technology, but I would say that it's because the scale is not there. If you see, compare Western agriculture with the kind of agriculture we have here, we are just lacking the kind of scale. And scale helps utilize technology to a much more efficient, in a much more efficient way. like modern farming tools can be used and all. But if we see, Indian farming has typically been in a small to mid-range domain. So that's where I think the scale is one factor which I think is causing problem in modernizing farms, right? Ashutosh, as we all know that Tesla is releasing its electric car in India at very low cost. How Indian automobile companies will overcome this problem? So I think they are already aware of this problem, and Tata Motors and all have already started on their electric vehicle journey. So I believe many of these participants are already quite late in terms of identifying this new trend towards towards more electric vehicles. But slowly, I think they'll also learn to compete with Tesla. I think that's a good thing because that kind of forces our existing set of companies to innovate even more, and that leads to more benefit to the end customers. Right? Uh, Thanks, Alok. Kanak, so what do you think these Saudi Arabic companies which are running their automobile on fuel will fall down in front of Tesla, or will they copy Tesla and adapting to stay in the market? What will they do if the fuel gets exhausted to stay in the market? Yeah, I mean they are also kind of so if you see, Saudi Arabia has already realized that they will eventually run out of crude fuel. So what they're investing is in terms of they're inviting new companies to set businesses in their country. And the second thing is they're promoting Saudi Arabia as a tourist destination too. So that's how they're coping with the kind of incoming crisis in terms of crude. So yes, they are aware of this trend, and they're kind of also looking forward to how they can I mean, they can participate in the next revolution. Okay. I think that,
So I feel that all the questions have been covered. Yeah, so all the questions have been covered. Thank you, Saurabh sir and Rohit sir, for answering all our questions with such great patience. Now, the most awaited part of the session has come. Many of you might have guessed it. Yeah, it's time to award the winners of the case study competition. My co-host Prabhav will proceed with the same. Over to you, Prabhav.
Thank you, Kadamni. Thank you, Saurav sir, for your excellent words. And thank you, Rohit sir, for your time and presence here. So the third prize goes for this business competition goes to Kritik Kumari. Congratulations, Kritik Kumari. The second prize for this competition goes to Anirudh Orahan. Many congratulations to Anirudh Orahan. And the first prize, the mega prize. The mega prize of this competition and the winner of this business case study competition is Abdul Samad. Many congratulations to Abdul Samad. Your case study was very well presented. Now, thank you to all the winners and the participants. Well, a competition is not just about winning or losing, it's about participating. And to keep the participation spirit alive in our participants, we have also got participation certificates, which will be mailed to all our participants within a short span of time. So once again, I would like to congratulate all the winners and all the participants for making this event a grand success. Now my co-host Kadamni will take you over to the proceedings and will proceed with a token of thanks. Over to you, Kadamni.
Before proceeding with the token of thanks, I would like to request Mr. Ghanshyamda sir to kindly put his words. Okay, so I think sir has left.
Gansham Das sir has some network issues, so we will proceed with the
Okay.
event.
So now we would like to thank you all for taking the time out from your heavy schedules and marking the event with your esteemed presence. We would also like to express our gratitude to the benefactor, Mr. Ghanshyam Das sir. With this, we have come to the end of today's event. We are sure to keep rejuvenating you with yet another fun and informative sessions. Till then, stay safe and have a pleasant day.
Thank you to all the speakers, to all the alumni, to all the professors who have attended this event, and all the
And
participants.
all the students, yeah.
All the students. Those were the backbone of this event. Thank you, one and all. Goodbye and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for organizing this and amazing presentation, Saurabh. Really very and very brilliantly fielded all the questions. It was educative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.